Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, and our ongoing study in Systematic Theology by John Frame. We're going to take a look at pages 14 to 23. We're taking very small sections at a time. Even though it's a very large volume, we're going to take small sections at a time. We're going to look at 14 to 23 on the concept of Lord, the concept of Lord. It's a very good presentation by John Frame. And as we learned in the introduction, we will look at the concept of Lord from three perspectives: the normative, the situational, and the existential. Let's go to block one, the concept of Lord as normative. Lord as normative is based on the Bible as authority. It is our central theological theme. Frame says that he takes Lordship as a central theological theme. And he mentioned, I didn't write it down here, but he mentioned past theologians he appreciates. And one of those theologians, he says he really appreciated the theology of Jürgen Moltmann and his central theme of hope. But Frame says, for my central theme, it's going to be Lordship. God gave Moses his name in three forms: I am who I am, and just I am, and Yahweh, Lord. In Greek, Lord is Kyrios. God says he wishes to become concrete by being remembered forever. So we look at Lord as situational. He becomes concrete through his mighty deeds and through proclamation of his name and through relation to his people. Mighty deeds, proclamation, and relation to his people. Concept Lord is central to the very nature of God. The Lord as existential now. It becomes existential. It becomes an existential reality through our confession of Jesus as Lord. That becomes the subjective awareness, and through the objective power of Christ's Lordship, and through, I love this, and through Christ's incarnate caring, loving, and responsiveness, which combines subjective and objective. That is the best presentation of the concept of Lord as normative as I could even imagine. That's tremendous. Very powerful block one. And he gave us the outline for this particular second lesson, because he gave us a normative, situational, existential. So let's go to block two, the concept of Lord as situational. Or another word we could use is concrete. The concept of Lord as it becomes concrete, as it is situational. And that concept becomes situational through relation as covenant. Covenant becomes the central meaning between God and Israel. The Mosaic covenant had a three-part pattern. God declared his name as Yahweh, the Lord. He proclaimed his past grace in delivering Israel out of Egypt. He then gave the commandments. Now the concept of Lord is also situational through sovereignty as covenant. We saw relation as covenant, now sovereignty as covenant. We are God's bride. We are God's sons and daughters through adoption. We are members of the divine family. And then finally, the concept of Lord becomes concrete and situational through redemption as covenant. It's all covenant, okay? Relation as covenant, sovereignty as covenant, and now redemption as covenant. Our sonship presupposes Jesus' lordship. Christ calls us his friends. Paul recognized us as bondslaves, Galatians 1:10. A servant of God, however, is one who is in covenant. So, the ideal definition of the concept of Lord in block one is defined objectively and subjectively, but then it becomes concrete very profoundly simply as covenant, okay? Lordship becomes concrete as covenant. So we have had the ideal definition, the normative definition in block 1, and that concept of Lord becomes concrete as covenant. Concrete as covenant, period. Now how do those two matter for our existence? How do those two, the ideal and the concrete, how do they become existentially important for our life? Let's go to block 3. And I just love the triune approach. Divine truth is always triune, I believe. My lessons always teach a triad. I always teach 3 blocks. But I love the fact that John Frame takes a triune approach to systematic theology. So block 3, how does the ideal definition and Lordship becoming concrete as covenant, how does that matter for our existential existence? All right, it becomes existentially important through objective power as deliverer. Yahweh comes to Israel enslaved in Egypt as the deliverer. He defeats Egypt and its gods, showing himself to be Lord. Exodus 3:19 through 20. I will stretch out my hand with all my wonders. But the concept of Lord also becomes existentially important through God's incarnate sovereignty. Exodus 3:14, I am who I am, reflects God's sovereignty because we interpret it as I will be what I will be. Yahweh determines his own nature. He is also sovereign in redemption, and we have 2 references in Isaiah for that. So the concept of Lord becomes existentially important to us through objective and subjective redemption. God directs the course of nature and the course of history. He is supremely right. He is supremely righteous. His word creates obligation in us. It becomes a call, and it creates obligation in us. We have an obligation to believe. Beautifully taught. I love the fact that John Frame does appreciate the contribution from Jürgen Moltmann, the man I studied under for all my adult life. But I really love the fact that he's a triune systematic theologian. I love this, that we're going to go through these lessons slowly, but we're going to go through small sections at a time. But we're going to be looking at systematic theology through the perspectives of the normative, the situational, and the existential. And I think it's terrific. I think it's tremendous. Basically, the normative is the ideal, the situational is the concrete, and then how does that work for us? How does that become important for our existential existence? So very, very powerful, and we'll do a really quick recap here. I don't want to go too long here. Let's go to block 1, the ideal definition of Lord. And it's going to be that note 1. It's based on the Bible as authority. It is the central theological theme for the entire book of systematic theology for John Frame. Remember that. You can circle 1:1 as the ideal definition. Lordship is the central theological theme for John Frame's systematic theology. God gave Moses his name in 3 forms. I am who I am, also just as I am, also as Yahweh, Lord. In Greek, that is Kyrios. Now block 2, it becomes concrete as covenant. And that, again, just go to 2:1. Just go to 2:1. Covenant becomes the central meaning of how Lordship becomes concrete. Between God and Israel, the Mosaic covenant had a 3-part pattern. God declared his name, Yahweh, Lord. He proclaimed his past grace in delivering Israel out of Egypt, and then he gave the commandments for future life. And then 3, to do a recap, 3, 3. Okay, so 1, 1, 2, 1, and we're going to go to 3, 3. The concept of Lord becomes existentially important to us because it becomes important through objective and subjective redemption. God directs the course of nature and history. He is supremely righteous. He is supremely right. And his word creates obligation in us. We are called by his word. We have an obligation to believe. Absolutely powerful, powerful lesson. But I want to say a few things here to close. I'm so thankful to the Lord that he led me to check out that YouTube lecture so that I got these the three perspective theory before I even got to the first page of the book. And I'm so thankful because that way I could be ready to approach this through the methodology that John Frame wants to enlist. So in this lesson on the concept of Lord, it just really popped. I really could see it. He presented the concept of Lord as normative and ideal, and he presented the concept of Lord as situational and concrete, and then he presented the concept of Lord as existentially important for our eternal life, which I thought was tremendous. I mean, very powerful teaching. We're going to stick with this. We're not going to take shortcuts. We're going to go from page 1 all the way to page 1116. I'm not skipping a single page. We're going to do this from cover to cover, but we're only going to take it in very small portions at a time, because look how much content is here in just pages 14 to 23. It's tremendous content, and it is triune systematic theology. John Frame is a triune systematic theologian, and he will approach all systematic biblical truth through three lenses: the normative, the situational, and the existential. And I think that's very powerful, because next lesson we're going to be looking at 26 to 35, and we're going to be looking at the concept of perspective. Now, fortunately, I was led to YouTube to listen to a lecture on perspective ahead of time, and thank God I was able to. But the next lesson, now Frame's going to give it to us, and fortunately for us, we've already done some groundwork in that area. But next lesson, pages 26 to 35, the concept of perspective. That's going to wrap up the concept of Lord, pages 14 to 23.